Did you see this? According to an analysis by the Tax Foundation, only 84 million Americans paid any federal income tax at all in 2010. Only 84. We have a country now. This is everybody over 310 million people. I don't know how many of those are crumb crunchers versus how many are adults, but I can guarantee you that there are more than 84 million adults. 84 million Americans paid any federal income tax at all in 2010. There are over 313 million Americans. That doesn't count the illegal, undocumented Democrat voters. The Tax Foundation, nonpartisan bunch, also found that people making over $50,000 a year paid 93.3% of all the income tax collected in 2010. That is, I guess, what Obama means by fairness. That's what he calls social justice. People who make less than $50,000 a year pay 6% of the total tax burden. And even this statistic, people making over $50,000 paid 93.3, is a little bit misleading, because when you get to the top 1%, the top 5, and top 10, you'd be stunned. I never can remember off the top of my head. The top 1% pay something like 20% or 25%. The top 10% are paying close to 50%. But it's also true that if you make over $60,000 a year in this country, you're in the top 10% of wage earners. And that's why it's always been, you start taxing the rich, you're not going to raise enough money to significantly reduce the deficit, as evidenced by the Buffett rule. Look at the minimum 30% tax on all millionaires would raise $5 billion. A rounding error in Obama's budget. By the news is out, it's official. Obama's deficit spending for his first term, $5 trillion. The sum total of all, this is why there's a Tea Party. This is why the 2010 midterms happened. $5 trillion in deficit spending added to the national debt. Now, I remember a long time, when I was 15, 20 years old, I remember the adults that I knew and hung around, my parents' friends, were always worried about the national debt. This is in the 1960s, the early 70s. I constantly remember hearing them worried about the national debt. Of course, I wasn't old enough to even really understand what it was. But as I got older and I kept hearing people talk about it, I said, well, for my whole life, I've been hearing about the national debt and how it's going to crush the country. And it hasn't happened, so it must not be that big a deal. Well, guess what I've become? I've become one of those people that's now very much concerned about the national debt, because it's never, ever been anywhere near as large as it is, expressed any way you want, as a percentage, total dollars, or what have you. We are nearing collapse. The old adage was the national debt never really mattered because we owed it to ourselves, therefore we never really had to pay it back. But we don't owe it just to ourselves now. We owe it to the Chicoms. We owe it to the Japanese. We owe it to a lot of people who expect to be paid back, who expect their interest payments to be made. So it's not just something that we owe ourselves and can forget about or forgive or what have you. It's far greater problem, because the tax rates required to make a dent in this, coupled with the spending cuts that nobody so far has had the guts to propose or implement, are unthinkable to a lot of people. That's why the total income tax, here's a stat I heard the other day. For those of you who have grandkids, their total life tax payments have already been spent at current income tax rates. If they went out and got jobs out of college, worked until they're 65, somebody ran the numbers, and your grandkids, 2 generations from now, their lifetime taxes have already been spent. Now, what are their tax rates going to be if something isn't done about it? This is why there is a Tea Party. $5 trillion. This president has rung up more debt than all previous presidents combined. And the horizon we can now see, it's Greece, it's Spain, It is Europe. And then we learned that only 84 million Americans out of 313 million are paying any income tax. They're paying other taxes, but not income tax.